He didn't try to stop her. Not when she packed a bag, not when she grabbed her keys, not when she walked past him without another word. Maybe a part of him wanted her to leave. Maybe that made it easier for him. She drove without a destination, just needing to be anywhere but there. The weight of it all pressed down on her chest, but she didn't cry. Not yet. Not until she pulled into an empty parking lot and let the reality settle in. It was over. The life she built with him, the love she thought was unshakable, had been nothing more than a lie for months. The first few days were the hardest. Waking up and remembering she wasn't waking up next to him. Fighting the urge to call, to text, to ask why. But she already knew why. He made his choice, and now she had to make hers. She blocked his number. Not because she was bitter, but because she refused to give him the power to pull her back. Whatever apologies, excuses, or regrets he had didn't matter anymore. Days turned into weeks. The pain didn't vanish, but it became manageable. She focused on herself, on healing, on remembering who she was before him. She picked up old hobbies, reconnected with friends, allowed herself to enjoy things without the shadow of him lingering over her. And then one evening she saw him. At a grocery store, standing in line, looking at his phone with a tired expression. Alone. She didn't know what she expected. Maybe to see the woman he chose over her. Maybe to see him happy, thriving without her. But he just looked ordinary. And for the first time she felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no longing. Just indifference. As she walked past him, he looked up. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but she didn't wait to hear it. She just walked away. Because she had already won. She wasn't the type to snoop. She never had been. But trust isn't just about faith. It's about honesty. And his honesty had been slipping away for weeks. So when he left his phone unattended one night, she made a choice. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. The screen was locked, but a single notification flashed before it went dark. A message from the same initials. Can't stop thinking about tonight. Her stomach dropped. There was no misinterpreting that. No way to convince herself it was innocent. Her body felt cold, her breath shallow. She placed the phone back exactly as it was, heart pounding in her ears. When he came back into the room, she forced herself to act normal. Studied him as he smiled at her, as if he hadn't just spent the night with someone else. She couldn't let it go. Not this time. The next day she followed him. Left work early, took a different route, kept a safe distance. She felt ridiculous, pathetic even, but she needed the truth. Needed to see it with her own eyes. And she did. Outside a small cafe. He sat across from a woman, laughing, leaning in close. His hand brushed over hers, familiar and intimate. He looked different, lighter, happier. Like a man in love. But not with her. She wanted to scream, to walk up and demand an explanation, but she didn't. She just watched, frozen in place, as everything unraveled before her. He kissed the woman before they parted. Soft, lingering kiss. The kind he used to give her. She turned away, feeling sick. The confirmation should have hurt more, but in a way it was almost a relief. The waiting, the doubt, the second-guessing, it was over. Now there was only truth. That night she waited. Sat at the kitchen table as he walked through the door, acting as if nothing had changed. But everything had. "I know," she said, her voice steady, controlled. He paused, the color draining from his face. "Know what?" She almost laughed at how pathetic he sounded. "Don't do that. Don't insult me like that." His shoulders slumped, the weight of his lie crashing down. He didn't deny it. Didn't even try. "How long?" she asked. Beat of silence. Then barely a whisper. "A few months." Month. Not days. Not weeks. Month. She felt something inside her crack, but she refused to break in front of him. "Not now." "Do you love her?" He hesitated. That was answer enough. She stood up, her decision already made. "Then go be with her." And just like that it was over. She started noticing patterns. Patterns that didn't make sense, at least not in the way she wanted them to. His late nights became more frequent. His explanations more rehearsed. The way he spoke had changed too. Shorter answers, forced smiles, as if he was trying too hard to act normal. One evening, she casually mentioned grabbing dinner at his office since he was working late again. His reaction was immediate. A split second of hesitation before he brushed it off. "Not a good idea, too much going on," he said, barely meeting her eyes. It wasn't the words that bothered her. It was the way he said them. That slight edge of nervousness, as if he was afraid she'd actually show up. And then there was his phone. Always on silent now. Always face down. And when she walked into the room, he'd subtly lock the screen, slipping it into his pocket like an afterthought. A habit he never used to have. The changes weren't just in his actions but in how he treated her. The small things, forgetting to ask about her day, no longer pulling her close in the middle of the night, conversations that felt more like obligations than genuine interest. He was there physically but his mind was somewhere else. With someone else. She tested him once. Mentioned a weekend getaway, something they'd talked about before. His reaction was telling. No excitement, no eagerness. Just an awkward pause before an excuse. "Work's crazy right now, maybe later." Later never came. The distance between them grew, but the worst part was pretending not to notice. Pretending everything was fine when every instinct screamed that it wasn't. She didn't want to be the insecure, paranoid girlfriend digging for problems where there were none. But this wasn't paranoia. It was real, and it was happening right in front of her. One night as he showered, she saw his phone light up on the nightstand. A name she didn't recognize. Just initials. The kind people use when they don't want anyone to know who's texting them. Her fingers hovered over the screen, heart pounding. She wanted to look. Needed to. But she didn't. Not yet. Instead, she started preparing herself. For the truth. For the confrontation. For the moment she could no longer pretend that the man she loved wasn't the same man anymore. They met in the most unexpected way. One of those chance encounters that feel like fate. A spilled coffee, an exchanged laugh, and from that moment, everything just clicked. Their love story wasn't dramatic or filled with grand gestures. It was quiet, steady, and deeply real. They built a life together, filled with morning kisses, inside jokes, and late-night conversations about dreams they hadn't dared to speak aloud before. She was his safe place, and he was hers. Their friends envied their connection, calling them the perfect couple. They finished each other's sentences, anticipated each other's moods, and never went to bed angry. It wasn't perfect, no relationship ever is, but their love was the kind people wrote about. At least that's what she believed. Lately, though, something had shifted. It was subtle, easy to dismiss at first. He started coming home a little later than usual, brushing off her questions with a tired smile. "Just a busy day at work," he'd say, pressing a kiss to her forehead before heading straight to the shower. He was still affectionate, still said "I love you" every night, but something in his touch felt different, lighter, almost absent-minded. She tried to ignore it. Relationships go through phases, she told herself. Work stress, exhaustion, it had to be something simple. But the doubts crept in anyway. Little things began to pile up. He'd leave the room to take phone calls, laugh at messages he wouldn't share, and had a sudden newfound interest in dressing better, even on days he had no meetings. One night, curled up next to him on the couch, she felt him tense as his phone buzzed. A quick glance, a barely there smirk, and then the screen flipped face down on the table. Reflex. One he never used to have. She didn't ask. Not yet. Instead she watched, observed, took note of all the tiny changes, the way he no longer reached for her hand absent-mindedly, how his mind seemed miles away even when he was right beside her. And then there was the scent. A perfume she didn't own, clinging faintly to his jacket when he came home one evening. It was floral, expensive. It wasn't hers. Her stomach twisted, but still she said nothing. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe she was being paranoid. Maybe love made people blind in the worst ways. She wanted to believe in them, in what they had. But deep down she already knew. Something was breaking, and she wasn't sure if it could be put back together.